Okay, this series of tutorials we're going to be covering how to create a set of shop drawings of Project 1, a Rhino. First of all, if you go into D2L on our course site under assignments and tutorials, you'll find a new section created called Project 1, and that's where your shop drawing is. And the first document in there is the assignment sheet. You want to open that up. And so this assignment sheet will kind of explain number one, what's expected to be included in the shop drawings, some of the conventions, like what's the naming convention, and then it'll also include details on what the project actually is, and it should give you kind of enough information to construct a set of drawings from these images. And further below, we'll see also a more detailed list. This is the rubric of what should be included in the shop drawing, and we'll talk more about that when we get in things like layout and dimensioning. But to start with, in this video, we're going to cover just kind of producing two-dimensional drafted drawings in Rhino. And so we're going to draft a couple of these that are. What we want to do first, we go back to Rhino. So you open a new file in Rhino. The first thing that you always want to check is what units you're in. So down here at the bottom, you'll see it'll tell you what units you're in, and I'm in millimeters. And in order to change that, I'm just going to type in units command line. And I'm going to press it. And here in the document properties window, we're already at model units, and that's going to change units of my modeling workspace. Go to my drop-down list here, and I'll change what we're likely going to want to use for making these drawings. So I'll go ahead and click OK. You can see down there, inches has, or I'm sorry, the units has. The other thing that you'll see is that there'll be 4 viewports open. So these are kind of independent windows into our model space, and basically they're like different for our model. So this one obviously is kind of a more three-dimensional, and then we're looking at it top, from the front, and from the right. Because in this case we're just going to be drawing, and it's going to be kind of working in a single plane. We're not going to use any of these other 3 viewports. We're just going to use top view. I'm going to double click on the where it says top view in the top left corner of that viewport, and that should expand our viewport there. Now the first thing I'm going to do also here is make sure you have your layers panel open. If you don't see this panel, you can just type in layers in the command line. It's not that, it's the word layer, I guess. And I believe that should open this panel. Layers are going to be really important because that's how we're going to line weight our drawing. And so you can see by default we just have one layer. You might have a series of layers. So we're just going to go through and add a few different layers here to establish like a series of different types of lines that'll help us keep organized as we draw. So I'll make a new layer, and I'm just going to type in construction lines. As I go, I'm also going to change the display color. You can see in here I have a bunch of options for each layer, different things I can set for each one. And the square, which right now is just set to black by default, is what's called the display color. I'll click on that black square, and I'm going to change the color of my layer for that guy. I'll make a couple other layers. I'll call this, that's going to be darkest line weight. So I'm going to use red for that. Medium. That. We'll make a couple others later on too. Start with these ones. Okay. And so what I want to do is kind of work backwards from from the information that I have here in the assignment sheet. So things like the overall dimensions of my toolbox and kind of some of the information I have about how the joints will work. So kind of working based on these drawings, I'm going to start just by drawing kind of overall orthographic drawings of the toolbox. So the first thing I want to note is the height, the overall width, length, as well as the size of the handle there. So the overall length is 16 by 6 by 6. The handle itself is also 6 inches, and that's centered on the short side of the box. So if I start off with just an elevation of this guy, and I'm going to change over to construction lines here, and I'm going to start with the command line. Just type the word line into the command line. It's a box up at the top where I have a blinking cursor, and then most commands in Rhino, basically you work based on the information that you're given as you enter different. For example, here when I typed in line, it asked me for a start of line, and I have a number of different options inside here, and each of those options I also have like a hotkey. So the underlined letter for each one of those things is also my hotkey for that. So, what I'm going to do is click somewhere in my viewport, so you can see my options have changed there in the command line. So I've established a point at which my line starts, and then what I can do is I can click somewhere else to draw my line, or I can enter dimension just by typing in a number in the command line, and you can see that constrains the length of my line to a certain dimension. And the other thing I can do is I can hold Shift on the keyboard, and Shift will like snap me into what's called Ortho graphic mode. So down here at the bottom, you see we have all these kind of different buttons that we can turn on and off that kind of change like how the interface works. And so that one that I described just now is called Ortho. And basically Ortho will allow us to snap to a particular direction. So if I want to draw a straight horizontal, I can hold Shift and I move my mouse close to horizontal. If I want to draw straight up and down, I can hold Shift. And you can see that at the bottom, it's toggling my Ortho mode. So that's something that you'll use constantly. And then working from that initial line, I'll create some other lines. And the other thing that's important to have on will be O snaps, which you'll see down here. It's also known as the object snaps. And when I turn that on and off, you can see this kind of series of options up above. Turn gray or get grayed out or become active. And so those are called object snaps, and I can turn different ones on and off. So for example, if I want to draw a line from the end of this line, I want my end object snap turned on. See, when I snap to the end of my line, I also get a little text bubble that says end point. So it's telling me those are the snaps that I'm connected to. And so once again, I can enter a dimension. I can enter 6 inches. And right there, I was actually, what happened was I used Smart Track, and I'll show you what. But anyway, so you would just hold Shift and draw a 6-inch line. Then I'll draw one more line to show the bottom. And so what I could do here, you'll notice that on certain positions, I'm getting a little blue cursor around a certain point, and that's what's called a Smart Track. So, for example, if I want to draw a horizontal line that aligns to the end of my top, the line at the top of my box, if I hover my mouse over that point for a second, you'll see it turns gray, and and then when I move away, it turned blue. And so that's what's called a smart track. Now it's telling me when I'm kind of snapped to an alignment at that point. So for example, I can kind of drag it down to here, and we can see that holding shift, I'm aligned to ortho and I'm aligned to the, rather than typing in the distance again, I could just align it to that endpoint using smart track. That's something that's pretty useful with 2D drafting Rhino. The other option that we have turned on down here is Gumball. And basically Gumball is going to enable you to quickly edit objects. For example, when I select that line right there, you can see that, that like a red and green set of arrows show up. Also, you can see grips. So there's a green grip at the bottom and then this blue arc. So those allow me to quickly grab something and move it, grab something and scale it, dimension. For this, it's really useful for working quickly, but it's not that useful for working, if you want to scale something to a precise dimension, it's grab it. You don't know what dimension you're going to. You can actually grab it, or you can actually click on it and type something. But it tends to be a little bit hard. So I'm just going to leave it off for this, for what we're doing now for 2D drafting. It's not that. I'm going to turn Gumball off. Okay, and then I'm also going to just close my box there. So now we've kind of generally defined the side of our box in terms of its dimensions. Now I should point out that those dimensions indicate like the outside dimension. So another thing that you'll notice is described in the assignment sheet is the thickness of the material. So obviously this guy up here is the metal handle, and the rest of the box is constructed out of wood, and the wood is all 5/8 of an inch. You can also find that, so it's defined in the construction details, I'm sorry, the connection details here, and down below where it says materials, you can also see that that's our steel, that's our wood, and those are our screws. So based on that, we can kind of begin to work backwards from the outside dimension, or to figure out where these planes are. So what I'm going to do first is actually looking at, I try and draw like this part of the box right here, really most of it in elevation. We can see that there's a slight space in between the plane at the end of the box and the side on the front of the box. So I need to figure out what that dimension is. I go down here to where my connection detail is. Right there, we can see that that little space is 1/4 of an inch. So that side extends past, and this side as well, extend past the connection by 1/4 of an inch. So the first thing we'll do, and remember we're still working on the layer construction lines here, is we'll offset that line that defines the end of the box by 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to type in the command offset, press enter. Now there's a bunch of options here as well. The first thing you want to do is set the distance. So I click on that button, distance, and I'm going to type in 0.25. Press enter. You can also type in, so for example, if I use the hotkey D and press enter, I can type in a fraction as well. I can put 1 divided by 4. I'll give the same result. And you can see the command offset just moves a line perpendicular to an original line based on a distance. And all we need right now is for it to do that once. I'll just tell it which side I want to offset that line to, offset it to the inside, and I'll click, and there we go. And I can do the same on the other side. I'll just select that line, press enter. So enter will always repeat the last command that you've used in Rhino. And again, I'll just click on the side I want to offset to. It remembered which dimension I used from the last time, so I know that it's 1/4 of an inch. And there we go. So the other thing Okay, so then that's kind of this little notch at the end of my box. The next line over will be the end of this plane that we're looking at the box from the side. So again, I can take the line that I've just offset, and this time I'm going to go 5 divided by 8, because I know the thickness of my material is 5/8, and I'll click. I'll do the same over here. Okay, and then we also need to figure out like what the kind of vertical dimensions are, where we're seeing the end of that piece and the side of that piece, and so on. And again, we can actually pretty much copy those dimensions, this section right here, because it shows all those different sizes. So, for example, if I start with the top piece, I know that it's 2 3/4 inch down from the top. So there's a couple ways I could do that. If I change onto my medium line weight here, I can use the command, well, I'll use the command Polyline. So up here or over here on the left, we have a bunch of different kind of buttons. And all these buttons are just another way to access commands. So for example, if I wanted to find that line command, click and hold under the line Polyline button. Click on the little corner and you see now I have all the different kind of line tools in that little panel. I can get to them again just by clicking the corner there. So that's the single line tool that I've been using so far. You can also do this thing called a polyline. And all that means is it's a series of lines that are connected or they're joined as one. And so what I'll do now is I'll start to trace based on my existing lines. And so you can see that I'm connecting as I click. I'm just making a series of lines that are connected. This time I'm gonna rather than snapping to anything, I'm gonna enter the dimension, because that's the distance down from the top of the box that I want to show for this end piece. And it's 2 3/4, so I'll type in the command line 2.75, press enter. See, now we're constrained to a certain distance. I'll hold shift again and I'll click. And then here I'm just using perpendicular to snap to that original construction line there. And here we go. Now you can see some lines will show up in front of or behind other lines. There's a couple ways to do that, or a couple ways to deal with that. One thing you can do is you can just lock layers. So for example, if I lock my construction lines layer, it'll show everything else on top of it. The other thing you can do is you can use like a set of arrange commands. So you can bring to front, and then it should show up on top of other lines. So all the lines that are on the same plane in the same exact, like overlapping, you have to kind of tell Rhino what order you want them to be shown in. So I can just show them like that. And let's see, then the next thing that I want to do here, let's deal with the kind of bottom addition. So I know that the side of my box is again the overall 6-inch dimension, and the bottom of my box is up 1/4 inch from that. So I can take that bottom line, I will offset it, and now you can see what's happening is it's offsetting it, I'm sorry, the offset line is on a different layer. And that's because I changed my current layer. Over here on my layers panel, I have a little check mark column, and all that means is that's the kind of active layer. So if I wanted to offset this line and have it be on construction lines, I would just go ahead and check back on the construction lines layer. I can also just make the line. So again, 1/4 inch offset, click. And I don't actually want that line to be there. I want that to be a construction line. So I can, rather than redoing it, I can select that line, right click on the layer that I want it to be on, click change object layer. And so that'll put it on another layer there. Okay, so that's the very bottom of our box. And this is actually a little bit deceiving here, because what we're seeing in this detail is we're seeing through through the box, or I'm sorry, through the joint. So for example, there's like a dado connection where the side enters the bottom, and there's also a dado connection where the bottom enters the short side. And the dado is that. So basically, there's a groove cut in the wood, and the part kind of slides into that. So this side that we're seeing is actually slotted into the bottom piece of our base, and it goes down to 3 inches or 3/8 of an inch from the bottom. But when we're drawing in side view, you can see that kind of relationship there. When we're drawing in elevation, we don't actually really see that. You see just the side of the base of the part. And so again, we can just take that line that we've just created, which we know is a 1/4 inch up bottom, and we can offset it, and the distance will be 5/8. And I will change my current layer real quick there. Okay, great. And so that we can also reference. We can reference this to understand the dado connection. So the base is always also going into the side. This is the same dado for both, or same set of dimensions for both dado connections. So we know that the end of the base is 3/8 inch back, 3/8 inch in that direction from the end of the side end piece. So we can take that line that defines that side, and we can offset it this time by 3/8 of an inch. So that's the end. I'll do that on both sides real quick here. That's the end of those lines. All define kind of the side, the bottom, how we would see the bottom of the box in side view. So I can quickly make that line, and rather than tracing out 4 corners with a polyline, I'm going to use the command rectangle. Again, over here in the tool panel, I can click on the tool. It looks like a little rectangle. I'm going to change back to my medium line weight, and I'm going to go. So I'm using the snap intersect, because that's where my construction lines intersect. And I'm going to draw that line. Actually, sorry, draw that line right there. So again, it's actually completely covered up, so I'll just type in. I'll select it. You'll notice when you select stuff in Rhino, if you're clicking in an area where multiple things are, it'll get us a little selection menu. And that will allow me to kind of click through which ones I want. I'll make sure I have that rectangle selected, and I'll type in bring to front. Now I can see it's on top as well. Okay. And the other thing we could do now is show, or we could draw the rest of the side of our box. See it here. The only last bit of information we need is where's the bottom of that side, because it sticks out here like that, right? We need to know where that little corner is, how high it is above the base of the box. Once again, we can reference this connection detail, and we see that it's 3/8 of an inch above the base of the box. And so I can use my offset tool, and I'm already set to 3/8. Go ahead and click. There we have it. And now I have all the information I think I need to trace the outline of the side of the box. But quickly before I do that, I want to copy this guy over to the other side. Symmetrical. So rather than redraw that end piece, what I would do is I would one of 2 ways. One way is we can use the command copy. And I want to make the point that when you hit Control-C, which is the default hotkey for copy in most programs, you'll actually be using a command called copy to clipboard. that is not the command we want. So copy to clipboard is a command that you can use to copy from one Rhino into another. If I had multiple Rhino windows open and I wanted to copy this drawing from this Rhino file to another Rhino file, I could use this command, copy to clipboard. But I don't want to, and I don't want to do that. I want to use copy and just move something inside my file and make a copy of it, duplicate. So I'll just type in the word copy. You can also reset your hotkey to that if you want. I'll let you Google that one to figure it out. Do that. And again, just like with other commands, it prompts me for what kind of information it wants. It says point to copy from. I use my snaps. I can click on the corner. I'll use my snaps for where I want it to go. And I'll just click there. I have a copy. Of course, I can hit Control Z, or I can go Edit, Undo, to undo anything. If the other way to do it, that's great for things that are symmetrical, is to use the command mirror. If I type mirror in the command line, this works a little bit differently. So what I do is I define like a mirror plane. So again, because I know my box is symmetrical, if I mirror my box, or if I mirror that line, I can go across the center, or the midpoint of that line. See, depending on the angle that I set for this plane, mirroring the resulting rectangle, different location. But so if I mirror it with a line that's straight down, you can see it'll copy it kind of across the mirror plane to the other side of the box. That's really useful for symmetrical drawing. And okay, so like I said, now I believe I have all the information needed to draw kind of the side plane of my toolbox. And again, I'm going to use the command Polyline this time, and just snapping to my construction lines. Click out here, and I have my smart track, so I can go to the end point of that guy, and I'm just tracing out where this side plane would be seen in elevation. I'll just go to the end because we don't need to see. We don't need to close that line because we won't see it in the drawing. And I'll select that line again, and I'm going to put it on the layer light. I'm also going to select it and type in bring to front. And there we go. So there's the kind of elevation of the side of our box. And I could do the same thing to model the handle. The handle's a little bit more complex because it's got a little radius corner, and it's got this little twist thing going on. So in order to show that, I'm going to draw another polyline. I'll start by drawing a polyline. And notice to the overall height of that handle is 6 inches. You can see it's connected to the outside of the short face of the box. And we can also see that it goes down from the top of the box to a distance of, let's see here, 1.5 plus 1 plus 1.25. So 2 3/4. So if we start drawing, so right now, oh yeah, so 2 3/4 is the same as the kind of side of as this rectangle here, as the side piece joint. So I can start drawing from that point right there. Again, I'll draw all the way up. 6 inches, enter. Now another quick way to draw great things here, instead of using Smart Track, I can actually hold Shift on my keyboard. So I'm snapping to Ortho, and I can hit the Tab button. So Tab will kind of lock me into whatever direction I'm going. Now you can see no matter where I move my mouse, I'm stuck on that direction. So what I can do is I can go down here and I can snap to the end piece of the other side of the box. and I'll know that that end is perpendicular with where I want the end of my line to be. So that's another way, rather than using Smart Track to get that job done. And then I'll go ahead and snap down to the other side down there. That's the kind of outline of our handle. So there's a couple things that we'll add before we too far here. One of them is we want to make a little radius on the end corners of that guy, and actually there should be a measurement there that'll show you that radius. That'll be updated when you go to reference the assignment. But I'm going to use the command fillet and type that into my command line. And what fillet will do is it'll make a radius corner between two lines. As long as they're close enough where they're touching, it'll just figure out where that radius should be, depending on what dimension we tell it. So in order to set the radius, I can click on radius option. I can just type it into the command line. I believe I actually do want a 1/4 of an inch. So 4. And then I need to click on the two curves. So it'll say select first curve. That's this guy. And even though it's a polyline, I have to select the two curves separately, just so it knows where I want that radius to go, rather than somewhere else on the line. I'll click on the second line, which is this horizontal one, and you can see it automatically connects them and creates a little arc in between. Same is true on the other side. So just pressing enter, clicking on the two lines. There we go. So now I've made a radius corner on the inside of that line. Now, the other thing that I could do real quick here is, in order to give it the thickness that it has, and you can see, while it's not dimensioned, it's called out with this leader right here. It says it's 1/8 of an inch by 1/2 inch. Flat bar. Obviously, the 1/8 inch is the thin dimension, 1/2 is the deep dimension, depth of it. So we want to offset it by 1/8 of an inch. So I'll type in offset again. And we can set which side we want it to go to. And the other thing that I'm going to do now, apart from changing my current layer, is I'm going to choose this option called cap. And what cap will do, if I click on it, it'll give me a few options, and I can click on this one flat. If you look at the end of the line, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's connecting the original line with the offset line. And that's good because it saves us the trouble of kind of making one outline from the original line and the offset line. Automatically connects them, creates a closed outline. So that's the option we'll use to kind of create a closed outline from the handle. And then I'll set my distance, so I'll type in 1/8. Press enter. So you can see that's one line. It's connected the ends and made one joined outline. If you want to edit things that are polylines and so on, you can use the command explode. It's over here on the side. It looks like an icon. Explode. And so now I can see that all these little individual segments are different, separate elements. If I wanted to join them and do other stuff with them, I can select whichever ones I want, and I can use that little puzzle piece or the command join. As long as two objects are touching, well, they can be joined, or two lines are touching, joined into one. Now you'll also notice one quick way to select things in Rhino is by clicking and dragging. So rather than clicking on each individual element, which if I wanted to select multiple elements, I would just hold Shift. I'm holding Shift, I'm clicking on individual lines, add to my selection set. And same thing over here. You can also hold Control to select things, or move them from my selection set. The other thing that I can do is I can click and drag though. And when you click and drag in Rhino, you can see that when I drag to the right, I get a solid gray line. And that line means that anything that's within the outline of that box will get selected. You can see just little corner pieces got selected there when I did that. Now if I click and drag to the left, you can see I get a little dotted line. And the difference there is that it selects everything inside the box as well as everything that's touching. So if I click and drag in that same area, you can see it's collecting those lines here and here that are just intersecting with the outline of my selection. So even though they extend outside of the window where I selected, and I can also hold Shift to add stuff to my selection, they got selected. So for example, here where I know I have a little segment there, I don't want to like select anything else. Click and drag to the right, just select that little line, right? You know everything else is bigger than that little. And then I can type in join to rejoin one object, change them to want them on. Okay. Now the other thing that I need to do is I want to put that little handle here. So second here. Okay, so the way we're going to draw that spiral in the handle is we're actually going to draw it in 3D and then bring it down into 2D. So rather than messing around with, kind of working between projections, because we're in Rhino, we can just draw a 3-dimensional spiral, and then we can use that to kind of show it in 2D. The first thing we'll need to do is figure out where that spiral starts and ends, and it's 8 inches long and it's centered on the handle. So if I type in the command line, and again this is the instruction line, I'll go from the midpoint. I'm going to draw out here for, and I'm going to click this option both sides. So I can draw out from the center. And if I want it to be 8 inches long in total, I'm going to type in 4. Press enter. So it'll draw 4 inches on both sides, which will be of 8. And then I'll click shift to one side. So I have an 8-inch line. I know it's centered on my handle there. And then I want to move it precisely to the center between the top and bottom of that handle. So if I use the command move, there's a couple ways to do that. So I can move it right to the edge, and then I could move it by 1/10 of an inch to get it in the center. I can also I can use Smart Track to do that too. I'm going to use the midpoint, move it from the midpoint. I'm going to go to the midpoint of the top of my handle. Now, if you don't get the little gray Smart Track snap, you can also hit Control on the keyboard, toggle Control. Do the same at the bottom. Now I have 2 Smart Track points, you see, and it's trying to find an intersection. And because I have those 2 top and bottom points, it'll actually find the in-between. So now I have that line centered between the top and bottom edge of my handle. Of course, the other way you can do it is you can put it right to the side, and you can then move it down by 1/16 and holding Shift. Now I should point out that rather than kind of dragging it, we use the command move there, and move allows me to move things by specific dimension just then. So click anywhere, and I can click anywhere else, or I can type in a specific dimension like that, Shift, move it in a specific direction by that dimension. Okay, so this line is essentially the central axis of our spiral that we see in our handle. So, if we go back and reference that, so where is it? That kind of axon drawing. You can see that's the flat bar that's kind of twisted. It's twisted 2 times, 720 degrees. So, what we want to do is draw a spiral around this line that goes 720 degrees from one end to the other. So I'm actually going to switch to a different viewport here. I'm going to switch to my perspective viewport. I'm going to zoom in on that line. Okay, I'm going to type in the command spiral. And spiral needs an axis. So we'll use that point to define the axis of our spiral. So that's the kind of central line, central axis. The next thing that it'll need is radius. And because we know that the width of our flat bar is a 1/2 inch, the radius will be a 1/4 inch. 1 divided by 4. And then it'll want me to snap in a certain direction. And again, imagine we're drawing kind of in plane with the width of our steel flat bar. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to draw that line straight up, down, vertical. And then I'll have to enter the same information on the other end. Oh, by the way, like I said, it's 720 degrees. So this option here where it says turns, you'll want to enter 2 there. And that'll be 2 full turns or 720. And again, we're going to type in a dimension, 5, and it should automatically, because we've already set the turns, it should automatically know where it'll end. And so now you can see we have a kind of 3-dimensional spiral wrapping around that central line. And if we go back to our top view, it looks pretty much like we would need it to look, right? So the other thing that I do here is I'm going to take that line and I'm going to flatten it. In order to flatten it, I'm going to use the command project to C-plane. And C-plane in Rhino stands for construction plane. The construction plane is basically like whatever the kind of coordinate plane is of your viewport. So for example, like in top view, and you can see it in that little corner icon, I'm in the XY plane, right? If I'm in one of my other viewports, right, or front view, I'm in like the XZ plane or the YZ, right? Because I have an XYZ coordinate system. So what I want to do is I want to project to C-plane in the viewport that has the top view, like the XY plane. I need to make sure I'm in a viewport where XY plane is my construction plane. So I'll go project to C-plane. And then it'll ask me if I want to delete my input objects. Yes, I do. 3D spiral anymore. And there you can see it flattened it out. Now it's a 2D curve. Control Z just to explain what I mean by project to plane. I went into my front view and I went project to C-plane. And I'll hit yes, delete. Now we go back to top view. See, it projected it onto the x-axis, right? Because in front view, we're actually looking inside at the XZ plane. Projected it onto the XZ. I'm going to delete those. Okay, so just make sure you're in top view or in perspective when you do that. So now what we can do is back to my top view. Oh, I actually tilted myself in top view. You don't really need to do that right now, but just to explain, when you're in top view, you can reset it by typing in top in the command line. You can also tilt 3D orbit by holding Control and Shift, right-click, drag, and that'll allow me to orbit any viewport. So you can see I'm still in, even though I'm in top view, and my construction plane is still the XY plane, kind of looking in. That's something that you'll find where you start 3D. For now, I'm just going to make sure I stay in top view. I'll top and press it. Okay. So now I'm going to take this line and I'm going to offset it from the center to create the top and bottom line. So I'll offset. And this time I can actually another little trick I can do. First of all, I'm going to offset it by 1/16 of an inch, right? Because that'll make sure that it's aligned to, that it's the right thickness for my handle, which is a total of an inch. The other thing I'll do now is I'm going to use this option both sides. See, that'll offset it in either direction from the center line. And that'll enable me to offset it to the top and bottom to get that thickness total. And you can see at the ends, it's kind of going within the thickness of my handle. So I'll click right there. And so now we have that thickness. And the other thing that I need to do now is because we're actually twisting a 3-dimensional flat bar, it's not just waving in one dimension. we would actually see it from the other side as well. So what we would do then is just take that offset line, use the mirror command, and mirror across our center axis. I'm holding Shift. You may find it hard to hold Shift sometimes and not snap to things. So a hotkey that I like to use, or anytime you want to not snap to an object, hotkey that I like to use, so you can do it two ways. You can go down here and you click Disable, and that'll kind of temporarily turn off Ortho. Now you can see I can't snap to anything. But if I don't want to have to click that button each time, I can also hold Alt, and you can see that Alt temporarily turns off OSnap. Right, so if I hold Alt and Shift, see I don't have any snaps getting in my way, and I can just click right there in the middle. Go. Okay. And so now, now I have the kind of edges that I would see for my spiral. What I would actually also want to show here is actually, I think you don't need both the top and bottom line for either side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explode this, and I'm just going to delete the inside line on both those sets. Oops, explode. I'm just typing in explode. And then again, I'll just select that inside line. You know what? I'm wrong about that. Okay. Rather than doing that, go back. I'm going to delete the center line of my spiral there, and let's just get this guy out of the way. So I'm going to use something you also find quite useful, which is hide. I'm going to type in hide. Press enter. So it's kind of out of the way. I'm going to delete that line. I delete on the keyboard. And what I want to do is, so you see that that line is the edge that I need to show at the top, but that line is the edge I want to show on the bottom. So I'm going to take this this original handle line that I've drawn, and I'm going to type in the command trim. And because I already had that line selected, that's the line I'm using to trim the other object. So if I wanted to trim away this stuff, because this line is in that way, I can click on that end, and it trims away whichever side I click on. Same is true there, and there, and there, and there. So I can trim away all the lines that I don't need. Go through. That's kind of all what you would see there. And again, that's just because we know that we're going to have part of the spiral showing up on the other side. And in order to get that other line back that I mirrored earlier, I can just type in show in the command line, and everything that's hidden will reappear. The other thing I can do, if I have a bunch of objects hidden, and I don't want to show everything all at once, I can type in show selected. And when I enter that command, I kind of enter into my hidden realm. Like I can enter into where all the hidden stuff is, and I can select just what I want to show. Press enter. Now I've brought it back to workspace. And so just like before, I'm going to select my handle, and I'm going to trim all the edges I don't want. Okay. And so now we kind of roughly have the outline of what our spiral would look like from the side. And what I would want to do next is number one, I'm going to take these lines, and I'm going to trim away my handle, original handle there. Okay. Now we can kind of start to visualize how that line turns into that line. The other thing that I want to do is I want to fillet the edge. In other words, I want this to look like a more smooth transition, because that's what it would actually be. In reality, right, if we took a piece of steel and twisted it, we would see the kind of smooth transition between flat part of the material and the spiral part. So again, I'll just use the command fillet to do that. I'm going to set a much bigger radius, like 1 inch. We'll start with that. And I'm going to click between those two lines. So you can see that starts to make a more gradual transition between those edges. I'm going to quickly there. That layer. Okay, so that's starting to become more clear. The other thing that I would do here, okay, so let's imagine we're going to pick a side that's going to be our leading edge. So what I would also be seeing here is I would be seeing the kind of gradual transition between one side and the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset this line, and I'm going to turn off my cap option, put that to none, and I'll set my distance to 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so we could have actually used the original lines. That's we're seeing the side of the spiral there. Actually, we wouldn't see that. We would see just where it twists away. So that's actually a much more complex thing to draw. So I think that this is kind of enough to show for the handle. The other thing I have left to do is to go in and kind of trim. You can see there's a little bit of overlap there where those two lines intersect. So I would use the same process, trim, and I can actually select both lines if I want to trim them with each other. And I can just trim away the little loose end. Okay, and so there's our elevation. And I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. So the only other thing that I would say is, as you continue to work, on the other orthographic drawings, I would use this drawing or whichever drawing you choose to do first, in the same way that you would work if you were drafting manually. You could start to build, for example, you could draw your plan based on these same lines, right? So I could start to draw construction lines down from this drawing in order to begin to describe where things would be in my plan, right? For example, we have that little edge that pops out from the side. We know that that's this line here. It's 3/8 of an inch away. I'm sorry, 1/4 of an inch away from, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch away from that face, right? Again, we could use that line. It's going all the way to the end. Offset it. It is 5/8 of an inch. Okay. And we also know that we would be seeing that plane, for example, and we could start to draw construction lines, start to draw where that would be. So again, I'm just pulling, rather than kind of redrawing everything from scratch, I'm pulling a lot of dimensions off from the drawing that I've already constructed, which will go a little bit faster. So again, we reference the assignment, see that the outside dimensions of both of those things is 6 inches. So I would actually take my original line, offset it 6 inches. Okay. And I could even That's 6 inches there. I could mirror these lines. Center. Quick way to select a bunch of lines. Right click on a layer and go to select objects. So if I want to move all those lines at once in front of the other layer, and I'm not doing it now. And I'll go bring front, kind of see a little bit better. Okay. And side. That's where I drew rectangle. So for example, that's what I would see if I were looking at the top of this end, a piece of the box. Use it to trim away that line and that line. I have the right text selected here. Okay, so you can see pretty quickly you can actually construct the plan based on a lot of the same dimensions you've already got. And then I could use those two drawings to begin to construct the other elevation and the sections and all that kind of stuff. So I'll end it here and show you guys I'm capable of drawing the rest of the kind of orthographics, and then we'll pick up in the next video where we need to draw our axonometric and then getting into construction details as well.